Good day and welcome to the Vigilate Dialogues. I am your host, Shaina Archer, inviting you into the National Boardroom tonight. If you are new to our program, Vigilate is the Virgin Islands national motto and it means to be watchful. Our mission in the boardroom is to have conversations about issues impacting our quality of life and, more importantly, how we solve them. The Vigilante Dialogues is broadcast live on Facebook and YouTube and also replayed on CBN Radio FM 90.9. Tonight with me, I have some, what I like to refer to as fellow taxpayers. And we are kicking off a new series called VI Law and Order. And what we hope to do is to talk about all things basically about the rule of law, governance, whether it's things happening in the House of Assembly or anything that would fall under that categorization of, so anything to do with the laws and the legislation of the land. So we know that for the last 12 months, or almost, we have been in a mode, as it were, with what's referred to as the Commission of Inquiry. So what I wanted to do is for us to start that basic conversation around, what that is, the implications of it, and the impact that it has had so far on our community, and looking into what is going to happen over the next 12 months by looking at, what's happened in the past in terms of other COIs. So we're going to try to pack as much into the next hour. June and Angel, you guys know, I've been finding information. I'm like, what? I can't believe that. So it's going to be an interesting one tonight as far as it goes. So share the feed, get your friends, your family, everybody involved, and feel free to, put up your comments or questions to us, and we're going to get it rolling. All right. So what is a COI? So as to not make any errors with it, I pulled up the Commission of Inquiry website. So on there it says, so we can't go wrong. And I found some other descriptions or definitions of it on the internet. So one said that a Commission of Inquiry is a tool to enable the investigation of matters of public concern in a public forum other than in an ordinary court. So we heard that a lot where they're saying, this wasn't a trial or anything of that sort or legal proceeding. Commissions are aimed at encouraging transparency through fact-finding and providing input for future investigation or criminal proceedings, if necessary. Commissions of inquiry are normally empowered to gather evidence through investigations, including entering and searching premises, requesting written statements under oath, as well as oral evidence given in a public hearing. So one of the things, I will pause here and just realize I did not introduce my panel. Especially for the I just talked about it, So with me tonight, I'm so excited, guys. Tonight, Dr. June Samuel and Mrs. Gelle Cameron. Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
And we're here as ordinary taxpayers.
Yeah, and you're here as a taxpayer. That's right. we're Virgin Islands all tonight. So
that's right.
I know you guys have been watching some of it. I have not been able to catch all of it in terms of the local COI that's been happening over the last 10 to 11 months. What, in terms of all what I just said, Angela, you're good for this. Summarize that. What does that mean to you as just an average citizen in terms of what this COI is supposed to be about?
So I think what our average citizens need to understand from that definition is that a commission of inquiry is simply what it says. An inquiry or investigation or asking a series of questions about a series of topics that have already been identified. That's the key thing with commissions of inquiry, right? They have to present in advance what is it they want to investigate or inquire more information about. And that's it. It is as simple as that. Asking a series of questions, getting more information, inquiring about a particular issue or series of issues. So that's, I think, the basic formatting of that. And you highlighted it already, but it's not a court proceeding because that's definitely where the public is still a little bit unsure, but
Yeah.
it's not a court proceeding.
Hmm. Yeah, and again too, I think in the early days, listening and speaking with persons, they felt that at the end of it, there would be a judgment, so to speak, and say, well, this is what they did wrong, and have what we consider to be sentencing. But
Yeah.
if there is any, as I said, if necessary, that we are a long way off still from there. So that's important to look at. So the mandate of this particular commissioner inquiry, because you hit it on the head, where there's supposed to be specifics in terms of what is it that a commission is pulled together. So when I looked at our law, which is very much outdated, guys, I mean, like, let me see if I find it. Cap 237, in case persons want to look it up, it's actually available on the government's website. And
Yeah.
the date of it is 1880.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I looked up, I came across Bermuda, since they have had commission of inquiries already. The last time theirs was updated was 1935.
I was about to say theirs is older than ours,
I
but
think
it's not
newer.
currently.
No, it's
It's newer.
newer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought theirs was
It was
older than
older.
ours.
No,
Hmm.
because one of the things in there that I found very interesting was that the premier can call a commission of inquiry.
Hmm.
So it was
Mm,
modernized now to come into play in terms of the
their own
joint,
government
the
system.
partnership, as we like to say. That's
Mhm.
supposed to happen, that if the elected government feels that they need to investigate something, they can actually take a resolution to the house or to their parliament, and then issue, basically put a commission in place. So I found some information about that, and if we get to it tonight, I'll mention some of the things in terms of what they've done in the past,
Yeah.
and also talk about even that we had a commission of inquiry here before, but I guess we didn't know about it. So I confirmed it, Angel. It did happen, but I guess not again at the level to which now this one is happening in
Yeah.
terms of what
Mm.
was being investigated. So if you have not been on the BVI inquiry page, you should go and check it out. bvi.public-inquiry.uk. This has all of the videos from the hearings. It has the statements that have been made by persons that have been called to give witness, as well as other papers, I think. So it's a very comprehensive collection of everything that's there. So the information is there. So we can't say that we don't know because it wasn't available. We have access to it through the website. So the governor announced in January, former governor, saying that the purpose was to establish whether there's evidence of corruption, abuse of power, abuse of office, or other serious dishonesty that has taken place in public office in recent years.
Hmm.
And if so, what conditions allow this to happen? This will ensure that BVI's governance is working in a fair and transparent manner for the people of the BVI. The commissioner will report his findings and recommendations to the governor, and the commission of inquiry is not a court, therefore it will not make findings of criminality. So again, just
Mm.
stressing that, because again, I think though, Angela, what might have happened is when persons saw the press release about the government hiring a lawyer or a law firm, that may have made persons think, well, okay, so this is a court, so you needed to have somebody in terms of defense. But again, this was part of, they were just getting legal advice, and they're working in conjunction with the Attorney General's Chamber, which is our government's official legal counsel that's in place. So it goes from here. All right. So that's, I think, the nutshell of what's been happening here, and where we at. So let's start talking about giving our thoughts around um what in terms of the recap of the COI. So far we've had hearings. What's next, Angel, in terms of coming up?
So I think for our COI, what's happening now is a review of all the evidence that has been given. You were saying you think that the public sort of felt that because they heard about um, attorneys being retained, that this may have given them this opinion. I think what happened was when we saw the first hearing, it
Mhm.
operates in function the way a court hearing would. So I think that is really what got people going, oh my goodness, we're on trial as a country.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. They're inquiring. So the stage where we're at now is where both sides go back and the evidence is really being pulled through and
Collected.
sifted through
Mm-hmm.
by the commissioner himself and that team. Because
Okay.
now that team needs to make a determination about the evidence that has been provided and it's standing with the evidence that was actually already retained and received. Because
Mm-hmm.
remember, they had requested a bunch of things in advance of the inquiry
Yeah.
queries. So
Yeah.
now they're doing their document discoveries and they're doing all of their
The reviews.
legal processes to review and compare and go, okay,
Mm-hmm.
how do we interpret
Yeah.
what has been provided to us against what should be, because they already have the basis for what governance should look like and they're comparing. So that's where we are. So from that comparison, I guess we'll get to that point about what really will happen next.
Yeah. What will happen next? So June, did you watch it? Did you watch a lot of it, or just a little bit of it,
I
or?
will. Well, I watched as much as I could, and
Mm-hmm.
what I missed, I've been systematically going back and looking at the videos.
Okay.
And I take great interest in it because, so as an ordinary citizen, um, I have a keen interest in understanding what is happening, where, why, how we got here in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Um, Understanding what is being found out, as it were, in inverted commas, and then listening keenly to hear, okay, where does this take us, and what's next.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's a whole learning process, and I suspect, Angel, for the rest of the public, there's a lot of learning curves here about, first of all, understanding the whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you said, when you heard that a legal team is being retained, um, for some persons, I think it apart from it, you wondering, okay, is this a court?
Mhm.
But apart from that, when we start to speak about having to have lawyers to speak on our behalf, it I don't know about other people, but it raises questions
Yeah.
in your mind about, okay, why do we really need lawyers?
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't gotten to that yet, but one of the questions I had in my mind is whether the way that we've done this whole review, whether there could have been more of a collaborative approach to having the review, in a way that we benefited, because it's a review, we're looking at governance, right?
Yeah.
So how could we have done this in a collaborative way, as opposed to what seems to me a lot of the times like a confrontational way,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore use the information to develop us, you know.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Because one of the
I don't
things
know if
I
that's
was
possible. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, that's an interesting take on how you're looking at it, because I believe there's a lot of our populace who are thinking the same thing. Could we
Mm-hmm.
have not done this in a less hostile environment? Could
Yeah.
we have not done this in a more collaborative way? But we have to look at COIs like the the ultimate audit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like the step above an audit,
Mm-hmm.
above an external audit at that.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at it that way, it's not really hostile unless you have a lot of
Like it's
in,
confrontational. Yeah.
inadequate inadequate data that would cause you to be nervous.
Yeah.
But it's not intended to be hostile. It's intended to test policies and procedures. It's intended to test your levels of strength in governance, and it's intended to test transparency and accountability. So literally, These things are just intended to test the systems that we have already set up and set in place. So I think if we change out commission of inquiry with, ultimate audit or whatever, nicer version of an audit that we want to say, then maybe people will look at it as not confrontational, but more,
Mm,
okay, we're just trying to find where there's loopholes and how we
Mhm.
can fix them and why these
Yeah.
loopholes have occurred.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that, Angel, because you know what, my mind just went back to. I think one of the highlights of the hearings were the testimonies of the auditors, both the auditor general and the internal auditor. And the fact that they basically had the same complaint as the Commission of Inquiry about people's cooperation with getting the information so that they could do their job in
Yeah.
terms of saying, what procedures followed, what the rules followed, if not, why, and try to get to the bottom of that. And it's almost as if the same attitude that already exists towards the internal audit department and the Auditor General's office basically translated over to the Commission of Inquiry. So if you already have this attitude that these people are out to get you, you kind of responding whether it was intentional or not. It, to me, it was glaring, because persons were like, wow, we didn't realize what was going on with the office in terms of the office of the Auditor General, which is a
mm-hmm.
constitutional office, by the way, because I don't think
Yeah.
many people know this. It's not a department of government per se. And
No.
this happened somewhere between 2003 2007, because I had just moved home from college and was working in the Ministry of Finance. And I remember when as part of the new constitution, that's what it was. As part of the new constitution, before when it was part of the negotiations, the department, not the department, yeah, DPP's office, Director of Public Prosecutions, and
Public.
the
Mhm.
Auditor General became constitutional. Again, to give
Okay.
them
Right.
independence from the
Yes.
civil service and any political interference and stuff. Because again, it's very important in terms of somebody basically kind of trying to keep us in line, because some of us are not going to toe the line as much as we would want them to.
Yeah.
So we have the rules, we have the laws, we have a lot of things on the book, but somebody has to be monitoring, which is
Yeah.
sort of what they do. And like, say for example, every year they're supposed to do audited financial reports. If there are
Right.
issues with a project or concern with a project, again, someone may say, minister might say, I need the auditor, maybe the internal auditor, to go and give us a report on what took place. And I'm sure they come back sometimes and say, no, everything was in line, or there were minor infractions, we need to tighten up here. And if we take the feedback positively and say, nobody's trying to blame you for anything, because if that was the case, somebody would have already been in jail. So it's something where we're not to that place yet, because when the DPP now is investigating you, that's when you know you have a problem,
Yeah.
because there's criminal there's criminal matters now that is possibly coming to go before the court.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's one of the things I think that we really need to help clarify for persons in terms of how that whole interaction took place. Well, I agree with you on the surface, June. It did look like that. It did look like it's a hostile something.
yeah.
Maybe there were other
But
motives, because there was a lot of that talk in terms of, well, why did the governor on his way out the door do this, and all these other
yeah,
questions.
yeah, and I think too, a lot of the language that was used, the way that the whole thing came out in the press, all I think all of that set the stage for it to seem
Yeah,
confrontational,
the
right?
reaction. Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's so important, because one of the lessons I've learned in going through all of this is,
Hmm.
we are talking about greater self-determination. We're talking about moving to a place where we are going to be more in control of our
Mhm.
affairs.
Hmm.
This whole process of self-inquiry, introspection, reviewing what we're doing, being accountable, that whole gamut is important as a part of us developing ourselves as a nation, We have
Mm-hmm.
to be willing to review what we're doing, because no system is perfect,
Yeah.
right? Review it from an objective place as much as possible, and
Mm-hmm.
learning and fixing the gaps where the gaps do exist. So from that perspective, I appreciate the commission of inquiry, because I think there's so much that I now recognize that, oh, well, yeah, we do need policies, and we need these policies to be followed, and we do need procedures that are followed.
Yeah.
And it's an important thing as a nation, I think.
You
Well,
know,
I'm
I
gonna
definitely agree.
yeah. So, well, okay, you want to say something, Angela, or can I float a balloon?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I'm gonna float this balloon for you, June, because again, you just mentioned something saying we're gonna have more responsibility for ourselves. Exactly what more responsibility are we going to have for ourselves than we already have, apart from
When
not
we're
having
talking
a governor?
when we're talking about wanting
We
to be
are already
independent,
responsible for
and
ourselves.
well, we don't seem to think that we
Oh,
are, though. We don't
No?
seem to think that we are. But
Uh-huh.
but one of what comes out in this commission of inquiry is how much, there's some responsibilities that we have had, that
Mm-hmm.
we have, and as a people, as you know as a government, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
that we may not necessarily have been doing as well as we should.
Okay.
So we do have, there is some of, yeah, there's lots that we're in control of, but somehow or the other we still seem to have this mindset that somebody else is pulling the strings. I don't know, Angel, what you think?
I think as a country, we are like college students. You know
Mm-hmm.
how a college student isn't quite independent, but they feel like they are because they're managing their own affairs, but mommy and daddy still sending money in
Mm-hmm.
order for you to be able to do so
Uh-huh.
and to
Uh-huh.
cover
Right.
your ability to be able to do so. You live on your own, but yet, there's still this other covering, that
Fall
covers
back
you,
as it was.
and you don't have to
Uh-huh.
worry about certain things because you know that you look to the public like you are self sufficient, but
Mm-hmm.
you're really not, and you know that. But what it is practice for your self sufficiency, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
that's why dorm rooms were created at colleges so that they
Yeah.
can practice to now be on their own
Mm-hmm.
officially. So I think
But
we're
still in a
college students.
community setting to help
Yeah.
support them. Gotcha.
So I think we're college students as a country. That's the way I look at it. The
In the
most
development
layman way.
process. I
Yes.
like that. I like
The
that
most
analogy.
layman way is that we are college students.
Yeah.
But June is right. We're now on the cusp of graduating. So graduation means that
Mhm.
your parents are no longer legally obligated to
Responsible.
support
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So this is the key time for us now to then make these determinations about what happens. But as
Mm-hmm.
it relates to what the COI has done to either aid or potentially deter that,
Mm-hmm.
because those are the two options on the table.
Yeah.
Um, that's where we need to be have a level of understanding, and these conversations are necessary for the country, because I don't think that we understand fully that the only two options for us is that the end result of this is it will aid our
Yeah.
continued fight to become self-sufficient holistically. We've
Mm-hmm.
graduated from this level of being under a covering, or it will completely diminish the conversations that we really want to have
Yeah.
about becoming self-determining, because
Yeah.
it will show that we have been neglectful as college students.
Yeah.
We've been on the dean's list for too long, for students who have not performed well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely something that we have to think about, but
Yeah.
we're not. So as much as you said, Shayna, that what else is there?
Wait,
There's so
I was just putting it out there. I'm just putting it out there. Because again, there are those that are but the proponents for full self-governance. And then there are those that are saying, similar to what you're saying, yeah, we're still in the development process and we need to get ready though, in terms of at some point you do need to be able to stand on your own and take responsibility for yourself, and how and what that looks like now would be what would be negotiated as part of the next constitutional
Yeah.
review. But where we are in terms of the day to day, it's on us. It's really now on us and been on us for a while now. Money wise, we've been off of grant and aid since the 70s, the late 70s, and been doing pretty well. But yeah, like both of you said, we have to I think take our responsibilities now much more seriously, if that is what we want to do. Because
Seriously, yeah.
one of the things for me that came out I kind of knew it before, but it became more apparent in terms of when they interview like the governors, and I read both governors
Statements.
their statements, right? And it speaks to the shortcomings,
Mm.
or the areas for improvement, let me call them that. The areas for improvement inside of the civil service, right? And there's a lot. And some people might feel, well, if FCO was aware of this, because obviously if the governor is aware of it, then the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, sorry, then why aren't they requiring us to do it? Because when I looked at I think it was the
Right.
foreign affairs committee in the UK Parliament, there's one word that's used a lot, and it's called encourage. It's
Mm-hmm.
encourage the OTs to do this, encourage the OTs to do that. And I'm like, this is part of the problem, because we're thinking they have oversight of our government, our elected government. But to me, their relationship wasn't the case.
Mm.
I don't know. What do you ladies think?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree that the mandates that have already been put out by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the language tells us that we have the autonomy, but I don't know if we have executed
Exercise it.
Embrace
or,
that.
or
Yeah.
embraced it. Maybe that's a
Yeah.
better word, whether we've embraced it.
Embrace it.
Um,
Hmm.
and a part of me wants to say, I don't know if we understand that we've been given our papers to move towards freedom. That's what
Yeah.
I really want to say.
Like we
But
could get off the
embrace it.
plantation now. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So it's
Yeah.
like those slaves in the 1800s.
But
There
yeah,
was a set who was free. There's freedom
Mhm.
papers were given to everybody, and then those from West End and had to come. The East End people had to say, "What? We're not still on plantations. Master already freed us."
Yeah. Yeah.
That
You could
I
go.
think that's where we are.
Yeah. That
but
the
I, but
building
I,
that
but that to that
understanding.
point,
Mhm. Go
right?
ahead,
But I mean
you.
to that point to Angel, because the last constitutional review that was done,
Hmm.
Shane and Shayna would be able to talk about this. Through a series of listening to various forums that we've had recently, we understand that at that constitutional review, there was supposed to have been a series of things that happened next to
Hmm.
move us further along the path
Yes.
in terms of that path to self determination that we are seeking,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and somehow or the other, that did not happen. So that's why I'm saying, Angel, it's about, have we embraced the fact that
Yeah.
Hmm.
we actually are the ones to determine how quickly or slowly we want to move this process.
Hmm.
And one of the things out of the COI for me is that I'm hoping that it makes us stay on the conversation and stay on the path of movement,
Hmm.
rather than it's a lot of conversation and then we don't see an actual plan of how
Yeah.
we're moving from where we are now to the next step, because that was supposed to have happened at the last constitutional review
Which is what, 14 years
quite
ago.
a few years ago.
Yeah.
14
We're
years
in
ago.
So
21 now, so it would have been 14.
Yeah.
we're
14 years
14
ago.
years behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at this point, now having a commission of inquiry that is highlighting that, well, these are the gaps, these are the things that these are the areas for improvement to really
Hmm.
take you to that next step.
Yeah.
But don't we think that well, I think Shayna mentioned it. So for me, the more interesting or surprising part of the COI was the fact that we don't even abide by our own rules
Hmm.
on
Oh,
regulations,
don't
policies,
get us
and
started.
procedures. So for me, it was shocking. Yes, I know that it's, that it happens, but at the levels where it
Very
happens,
levels.
I think for
Yeah.
me that was the more shocking bit, because
Yes,
then it
yes.
it and that's why I said about being detrimental to our move towards
Yeah, the
being
progress.
self-sufficient.
Hmm.
It then questions, is it the people in policy making, or is it the system
Mm.
that has erred and is flawed? Because there's an argument on both ends.
Yeah.
And it's hard to really decipher that based on all of the conversations I have listened to from the COI, a lot of the statements. It's difficult to determine whether the people have erred in um, this process of good governance, or whether our systems have failed us, and our lack of being audited holistically. I'm not just talking about financial audits, because people hear audit and they only think about finances.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm thinking about being
Anything
audited.
can be audited in your operation.
Anything. You should
Yeah.
always have IT audits. You're supposed to have procedural audits. You're supposed to
Hmm.
have financial
Security.
audits,
Hmm.
security audits. Everything should be audited. So in our inability to be able to do that, the system has failed, because it's been the same system, even though we have modernized.
Yeah.
So same system, and we have modernized. So it makes me go, who has erred here?
Yeah.
Where do we then say that we have gone wrong? And that goes back to June's point, because I'm trying to figure out, well, then where do we start? Because is it
Yeah.
the people, or is it actually the system?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot to unpack, and I think, well, she touched on our favorite word, Angel. There wasn't a plan after the 2007 review. That's the first thing, because
Yeah,
again, we can talk about a thing, but if we haven't basically made decisions, put it on and say, all right, every 5 years we're going to be checking our progress towards whatever the additional responsibilities are, making sure we are doing the things we are responsible for well, and then from there, because you're building a case to say,
yeah,
I did well, I took care of myself in college, and I am ready to go out on my own and can support my family, and all these other things that are supposed to be happening at that next stage of your life, so to speak,
mhm,
that we do that. So it was for all benefit. So Angel,
yeah.
I'm going to ask you, so who's the system if it isn't the same people? Because
So
see, this goes back to my whole thing where people have this impression that FCO can make the civil service do these corrective measures that should have been done from years ago,
exactly,
and it's
no,
not the case.
it's
Not.
not the case.
And
I
that's what
think,
I was going to say to Angel, I think it's a combination of both, because they may be
Yeah.
one and the same.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I beg to differ, because when we think about people, usually the
Mhm.
people that we would think about are always the
Hmm.
people that we have elected by choice.
Okay.
The
In
the
terms of the
system is
policy
the
makeover,
system is run by a service.
I got you. Hmm.
That's all I'll say. I don't get myself in trouble.
No, but we had to educate and raise awareness, so we're gonna help them out tonight. So
It's run by a
public
service, right?
service,
So
yeah, because a lot of times when we talk about government, we're lumping everything all in one. Eh? So there's the elected ministers, which sit in cabinet. Then you have a public service, which consists of ministries and departments, and basically the statutory bodies that are responsible actually for running the country. So
yeah,
they're the ones that get up every day and say, all right, we gotta make this, and this happen. And if it doesn't happen, basically they're responsible for it. I think that's the long and short of it.
yeah.
So
That is it.
yeah, and even though we have elected leadership, sometimes we do put the undue burden on them, in terms of expecting them to know the nitty gritty details sometimes of what's happening down at department levels. But the permanent secretaries and department heads, they're the ones that basically run the system. So if the system needs to be modified, then it's kind of on their shoulders. Whether or not they have the support of ministers,
Yeah,
no, that's the whole next ball
Yeah.
of wax. So I know
And
that's
that's
what
and
June
that's
was
yeah. But
alluding to.
to me
why,
that's
yeah.
irrelevant. To
Yeah,
me that's
okay, I
irrelevant,
got you.
because if we think about it, the system itself is our service. It doesn't matter who comes into office. We need to always ensure that our system policies, procedures, and personnel are modernizing, moving with times and changing, making efficient decisions, and looking at how to move the system in a
Yeah.
better position for our
Yeah.
future.
I got
The
you.
people
So
we hire,
mhm,
their job is solely to manage the system. You can't really and write new policies based on information that they're provided. If
True.
you are not getting that information, there's been no change, the same people in the same positions for 48 years. I mean, the
Yeah.
system is a
but this
problem.
is, but, the-
Okay.
but you see, this is where I have the challenge, and I'm saying that it's a combination of both, because within our system we do have a system that is responsible for auditing, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have the Auditor General.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
The Auditor General has been providing audits that says your system, these are some of the issues in your system that needs to be looked at and rectified.
Uh-huh.
Um, so, but the question now is, where in the system does that information go to, and who are now the people responsible for acting on that information?
To me, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the system has failed. There was no corrective issues. We saw
Right,
we saw it. We
right,
heard it.
but there are people who have to take, the people in the system who have to take that information and action it.
Mm-hmm. So
So
it's
that's
the
why I'm
people
saying it's
in.
a combination of systems failing and people failing.
Yeah, I see, and I look at it different. I think when we
Okay.
think about people, it should only be the people we've elected. That is people. Everyone else who works as a part of our public service is the
Mm-hmm.
system. That is the system.
Okay.
So that is
I got
holistically
you.
the system.
Yeah,
I
Because
I got
got
you.
you.
we can't point a finger in every single department. Actually, we can. In every single department of where a person has gone wrong. It's not their fault. It's
Mm-hmm.
because this entire service hasn't been following the procedures. So that is our system. If we want to
Uh-huh.
point our finger at the people, then we can only point at who we have hired.
Yeah.
Right.
And saying
We
Right.
can't point we
they're not
can't point at
managing the
who
system well.
exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
the
So
system
I have a
holistically.
comment here though. Somebody commented and saying there's too much micromanagement by the policymakers though. So that seems to be bogging down and clogging up the system as well.
Well,
So this is
yeah,
June's point.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's about
So the dynamic between
the
the
people
people who have yeah.
understanding their role in the
Uh-huh.
system,
Okay.
because your role, the people that Angela identifying as people, your role is to examine what is happening in your systems and fix
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that, if there was anything I was irate about out of the COI, is
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we have we have the power to fix the system,
Mm-hmm.
because we have the people, we hire people to
Mm-hmm.
do that. That is your role. So
Your
all of these,
responsibility. Yeah.
yes, all of these things that are gaps that have led to questions about accountability are because of gaps in the system, but we hire people to fix that. That's your role.
Yeah.
So I,
Exactly.
I find it hard to accept that we are not in control of our affairs and we couldn't do this because some external agency or body somehow or the other is not supporting us. We
Yeah.
should identify that this is what we need and ask for it and get it however we
Yeah.
need to get it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So based on everything you guys have saying, let me see if I'm following now. So we know that according to the Constitution, the governor has responsibilities in terms of, well, say oversight. I don't know that it's management of the public service. Yeah, they have oversight, especially when it comes to
Oversight.
hiring and performance management.
Mhm.
Stick a pin there, performance management. So
Mhm.
so there's a system that's supposed to be doing that. So we have people that are responsible again for the operations. And the people we elect, they're like the executive management
Mhm.
over all of this, because
Yeah.
again, they're the ones that say, I should even back it all the way up to the House of Assembly, because right now
Mm-hmm.
they're
Don't
sitting
go that far. Don't go that far yet.
no,
Wait.
no. Well, I'm telling you
Continue.
why.
Continue.
I'm going to tell you why though. Because right now they're debating the annual budget, and the budget is the money now that this system is going to spend for the next 12 months to operate. And if that, let's say that the HOA is the executive management that's saying, listen, we want to see results. Because at the end of the day, that's all, the elected officials should be concerned about. Is the system producing results to get us
Mhm.
the
Mm-hmm.
outcomes that we want? And
Mhm.
I think
That we
sometimes
want.
because they get frustrated because things aren't happening as fast or in the way they want it to, then they start to micromanage and get down into the
Yes.
weeds of certain
Mm-hmm.
things, and the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
starts to get
All
bogged down
apart,
and
right?
clogged up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention though, I remember one of the things that the late Elton Georges used to tell us all the time when he was the deputy governor about the nature of the public service is supposed to be apolitical. And I
Yes.
find that over the last 10 to 20 years, the service has become politicized.
Mhm.
And that is also part of it. And this will not come on the COI, but this we know on the street that,
Oh yeah.
the service became politicized. And that is part
Mm-hmm.
of its dysfunction now, because depending on which administration is in, some people they don't give their best, let's put it like that, and take on the responsibility that they have. Because some people think of it as being, oh, they're looking for somebody to blame. This isn't about blame. I am paying you over $100,000 a year to be responsible for
Yeah.
something. So whether it goes wrong or right, you are responsible. That's just me as a taxpayer now, because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, I'm paying the bill for all of
Mm-hmm.
this. And at the
Mm-hmm.
march I heard, we heard Bishop Klein say, when we add it all up, if we're averaging $400 million a year over
Yeah.
5 years, you know what I'm saying? That's $2 billion. Where is it
Mhm.
in
Where's the
terms
evidence
of
of
the
it?
outcomes that we want to see? And at the end of the day, quality of life for the people, you know?
Yeah.
And that is where I really was like shaking my head with this. I'm like, geez, we know this, we know exactly what we should
We
have done
know.
from years
Yes.
ago, but
Yes.
somehow we couldn't put country above whatever else was happening. And the politics that played into triggering this, because again, if we were serious about fixing the system, we would have already done it
But
from.
but I want you
We
to go
would.
back to your point, Shayna, about
Mhm.
breaking down the fact that our deputy governor is responsible for the system. And I want you to break that down because I think that's a key point that our public doesn't fully understand because we're so used to blaming the people that we have hired, which,
Mhm.
yes, fully they have a role to
They
play,
have a,
but
yeah.
we need to understand where that role sits because
Yes.
we have a body elected by us
Hmm.
to manage the system itself. So
Yeah.
even though the
Mm,
governor is the overseer of this system, we have a person appointed to
Yeah.
manage
right.
our public service.
Hmm.
So
Right.
if if we are to really have a conversation about, where we have gone wrong, and that's why I postured, is it the people or the
Yeah.
system?
Yeah.
Because if we really break it down, we'd see that these
Performance
are
management. Hmm. Performance management is where it's at. And that has
Yeah.
always been a very sensitive topic. So, again, when
Yes.
we talk about good governance, and we like to use this word accountability a lot, right?
Mhm.
If I take that from, again, you take it all the way down to the level of the messenger. The messenger has to give account for his performance for the job that he's been given, right? So it goes all the way up the chain. So if that system, the performance management system, just to pick on that as one of the
Mhm.
systems that's part of this whole, that has to be functioning like clockwork. Because even if persons aren't performing, the performance management system is supposed to address that.
Address
It's
that.
either
Exactly.
you're gonna develop these people to be able to
Right.
take on the responsibilities that you've given them, you hire them
Yes.
to, or you're gonna move them along and let them look for a job elsewhere. But what we tend to know over the years, if we're gonna talk the truth tonight, is we move them around.
Yes.
We move around the inefficiency and then wonder why the system is the way it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
No, that's absolutely true. And again, from my perspective, I think this is one of the opportunities coming out of the COI, as a people, getting to a place of really being honest with ourselves about what it is that we really have and what is really happening,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
because so often, when we look at what we say and the language that's thrown around. We're always looking for persons and personalities as the cause of the problem.
Hmm.
Yeah.
When a lot of what is happening there's system issues that we really have to be willing to dissect
Yeah.
Yeah.
and make some hard decisions about how we change up these systems because they do not work for us in our current reality.
Yeah.
But are we willing to make those hard decisions? And
Yeah.
we have to get to that place if we really are serious about going the step to self-determination. So we talk
Exactly.
Yeah.
self-determination and independence from now till thy kingdom come. If we
Mhm.
don't fix this, I wouldn't want to see where we will be 20 years from now.
From no. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fix
Yeah.
it.
If you just tuned in, you're tuned into the Vigilante Dialogues. I forgot the radio audience. I'm your host, Shaina Smith Archer, and I'm here with my fellow taxpayers, June Samuel, Dr. Samuel. She's a regular taxpayer today, so I drop off the doctor.
Yes.
And my good friend, Gelle Cameron. And we're talking about the Commission of Inquiry, the implications on us as and the impact that it's had as a community. And even, we've already gotten into the solutions really in terms of where we have to start the planning to correct the system.
Yeah.
Because for me now, regardless of the outcome, and we'll do this in a show in the new year in terms of, again, maybe waiting on the report, but still, again, dissecting this whole thing to say, there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from this that will make us better. Some people's reaction to the COI is that it wasn't in our best interest. And, the way it was handled from the UK side, yeah, it didn't make us look too great. But we know on the ground, all is not lost, because we understand what the dynamics are in terms of how the issues and the problems that were highlighted. As the mandate say, how were these things allowed to happen?
Yeah.
So apart from things like abuse of office or anything of those nature, which to me, is leaning towards looking for criminality in the system. Um, if the system is constructed, I would say, in such a way that when those behaviors come about, the system will take care of it. Because if you do break the rules and
Hmm.
there are those that are serious about accountability and the rule of law, you
Hmm.
know, it will pull you out and say, hey, you
Exactly.
either correct this behavior or we're gonna have to deal with you. But we have to get to that place because again, good governance is a serious thing, and it's a lot more than just talking about accountability because they're the matter of responsiveness. Is the system responsive? Is our public service responsive on the levels it's supposed to be? Efficiency and effectiveness is part of good governance. Is it
Yeah.
there? And we can't say that, in terms of we can do better. If we were doing our best, I would say patience. But if we know that we're not giving our best effort when it comes to efficiency and effectiveness in the service, then we got to pull up our socks. We
Yeah.
can't put it out on somebody else and say, well, this person didn't do it or that person didn't do it. But the service, I think the service is probably close to what, 4,000 now, if not past that, guys?
Yeah. I think it's a little past 4,000.
Yeah. So if you have a culture within there, so again, let's peel off the politics. If you have a culture in your service where we talk about continuous improvement, where you always trying to be your best, giving your best effort, it's going to take care of the politics. but we've allowed, the deterioration and the dysfunction came in when the persons in the system, managing the system, working in the system, responsible for it, have allowed the culture to become part of what it is. So the organizational culture, now I'm stressing. So
Yeah.
that's where I think, one of the things for me, the COI started to really get me thinking about, because again, apart from what's going to happen on the other side, it's like, what is this saying about us as a people,
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
that we need to
Mhm.
address, and how are we going to go about it? Because we really, if we, again, Doc, you would tell us, if we're in denial,
Exactly.
can't fix the
Hmm.
problem.
Hmm.
So if
Yeah.
we're gonna walk away from this thing and say, well, it's not our fault, and we
Yeah.
FC and DO are not going to come along and fix it. The foreign
Yeah.
minister is not going to fix it. The foreign secretary is not going to come along and fix it. And all these other people who supposedly have responsibility for the overseas
Yeah.
territories,
Yeah.
you know?
So it's in terms of where we go, um, I think it's important to see some movement somewhere on the ground. I like
Mm-hmm.
to think grassroots movement that helps us to begin to process this,
Yeah,
Hmm.
right? Um, what is good governance? What does that look like? What is it that we want to see? Um, and how are we? Because regardless, the findings and the recommendations are going to come, but
mm-hmm.
I feel like as a people, we shouldn't be sitting and waiting for the findings.
Yeah,
We need to be having some sort of strategy that says, okay, this is the strategy. If this finding comes and this is where we're going with this strategy,
yeah.
Hmm.
right? We need to, and I'm looking to see, and I'm not sure where that's going to come from, but it needs to come
It
from
needs to come. Yeah.
somewhere. It
Yeah.
needs to
Yeah.
come.
So she's already in show two, Angel.
Yeah.
Talking about the
Sorry.
active citizenship, because that's the other
Mm,
part of good governance that we don't
Hmm.
talk a lot about, and we're gonna
right.
definitely hammer it going into next year. But I just had a thought. What was it in terms of what you were saying? Oh, so here's the thing. When they announced that standing finance committee was coming, right, I was like, you know what, and I posted this on my Facebook page. I was like, it would be I think that's part of transparency. The Standing Finance Committee hearings need to be public. And here is why. Again, the taxpayer should know what y'all are going in there to plan to do with all taxes for the next year. Understand what have you accomplished, if
Yeah.
anything. Because this business of annual reports being late 2 and 3 years later, and but every year you just get in this budget like it's automatic
Mm-hmm.
through a process that's behind closed doors. It's not transparent, it's not accountable, it's not good. And what I would have loved to see now, if they were public, and I guess we'd have to wait till the transcript comes out, is that department heads actually sat down and watched the COI and said, you know what, let's start working on these issues now. I know if it's just one process you're going to fix for next year, start fixing it, but be proactive. Let's not say we're waiting on, well, what the commissioner is going to encourage us to do,
Yeah. Hmm.
because he's
Mm-hmm.
going to encourage in his report. And again, the serious matters in terms of criminality is what will be addressed without a conversation. But the other things in terms of how does the service work better with the Office of the Auditor General? How
Hmm.
do we work better with the internal auditor, and understanding what their responsibility is? Because if they're not doing what their role is, then that's a different conversation. But they're only doing what they're responsible for, and we not feel that they out to get us. So whenever they come, we're gonna try to frustrate them, don't give them documents, and information is all of a sudden unavailable or missing.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we're serious about this, June, that's why I expect to see in the thing. I want to see, yes, they went in there and told, again, the House of Assembly, the executive managers for the system, and said, this came up in the report, so we're looking at whether it's to automate a process, do better record keeping, um, work within their ministries, on different policies to put in place. and bring these things forward, but not that we're going to react to the report and then as soon as we turn our backs and off to the next thing, it's like we go right back to business as usual.
We go right back
Exactly.
to right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That
I
is one
think,
of the things I don't want to see.
yeah, I think this is a key point, that we have to be active citizens with an understanding,
Yeah.
because the conversation is aimed at getting people to understand in layman terms, in everyday language, what is
Hmm.
transpiring and how it affects us and our future.
Exactly. Exactly.
One of the implications that can come out of this is us not being responsible for our financial standings moving forward. And that's a very big implication to come out of it, because
Hmm.
at present, the way we manage our government finances, there is a lot of social responsibility management in there that really shouldn't be in there. So, we find money for bush cutting contracts for somebody who having a hard time. We find money, to do all of these social things that support the community, yes, but they're not the right way to go about in supporting the community. And we're going
Yeah.
to lose the
Right.
ability to be able to do that, or even determine how and where the money is spent. So
Exactly.
locally on the ground, we may determine that infrastructure is key item number one. They may
Hmm.
Right.
determine that digital infrastructure is key item number one, and more than half of our
Right.
budget will go towards making sure that we are up to a digital age,
Yeah.
as
Right.
it relates to networking, etc. So if you understand what potential outcomes can be had, then we would rally together and ask the questions of the people that we've hired and say, what is our next chess move?
Yeah.
Somebody's
Yeah.
about to take the king. What is the
Hmm.
next chess move? Here are
Yeah.
the people that we have left on the board. Here are potential outcomes. How can we, as a people, say that what we will not take as a result of your findings is direct rule?
Yeah.
What we will be amenable to is managing, showing us how to manage our processes with a timeline of less than five
Yeah.
years.
Exactly. Exactly.
These are the conversations that we now need to say, how do we start this conversation? I know
Yeah.
there was a small group, I think Shana knows about the little small group, who wrote to the governor and said, look, the COI is about to wrap up, and here's what we want to say on behalf of the people. We don't want these things to happen. We will
Yeah.
not accept a direct rule. We would
Hmm.
not do these, certain things, but we understand that there's only 3 or 4 potential outcomes.
Yeah.
We can't run away from that. The process has already happened. So
Yeah.
with that understanding, here is where we think we would be good. Let's meet
Mhm.
in the middle. Don't just take over.
And I'm glad you brought that up because our posture is going to be very important. And I always tell people you get what you negotiate. So we ought to
Well,
take
first
the
of all,
posture.
but
Uh-huh.
Shayna, first of all, we have to understand that we can negotiate. We
Well,
have the
yes,
power to negotiate.
it starts with that. You're correct. Because again, if
Okay.
it is a democracy, right? For the UK to just come in and blatantly say, "Hey, we gonna take care of this," but I would say I would blatantly say back, I don't think so, sir, because when you required our government to sign the financial management protocols back in 2012, again, there was no plan that was laid out to say this is what you need to put in play to deal with your financial management, because a lot of the
Right.
things again that came up in the
Inquiry.
COY is around the financial management
Yeah.
Financial
system.
management.
Mhm.
Whether
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about projects, whether I was talking about the money stimulus program, whatever it was, everything went back to money. And which means is the financial management system now has issues. So if you're
Right.
telling me now, the protocols gave me kind of what we call the guidelines, so to speak, but it didn't again mandate corrections or corrective measures to the
Yeah.
system. So now 10 years later,
Here
again,
we are.
they're acting as if they're surprised at this. It's almost as if you leave me right here to continue to play in the mud.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Watch
but
me.
But
Uh-huh.
Shane, you have to look at it from the other side. I gave
Uh-huh.
you an opportunity to fix it yourself, to come
Well,
up
yes,
with what works for
yes, yes.
you.
I agree because again, we didn't negotiate. So this is where I was going with it. Eh? So you bring this document to the premier and say, hey, you need to sign this, or else we're not gonna substantiate your contingent liability. That's basically what it boils down to, right? In a nutshell, we're not gonna
Yeah.
back your loans and say you were on the hook if you go into debt.
Hmm.
And
Mm,
I don't know because we weren't there, but I would have hoped there was some level of negotiation to say, well, um, hold on. And I think there was, because what I came to understand just this year is that, and I know this for a fact, a lot of the things that we had as part of the financial management reform project in 2003 to 2007 ended up in that protocol document. But then
Mm.
mm,
again, it wasn't any required action. It's kind of like be guided by, for example, if you have a project, you need to prepare a business case to show that this is viable and feasible, right? Before you go ahead and say you're taking public money and going
Okay.
ahead with these projects that don't make sense. All right. That's essentially what a business case is
mm,
supposed to say. This is a good idea. This is why, because it does the analysis and you say, well, this is how much it will cost, and you go ahead and do that. And so the information ended up
mm,
in there to a large extent. Because when I read the protocols, I was like, but this is the financial management reform that we were supposed to do. But executive
mm,
management didn't pull the trigger. That was a problem with that. Because, like you say, Angel, we know what we were supposed to do. We had opportunity to do it. We had the consultant that did the Cayman Islands financial management reform, which was out of the New Zealand Treasury.
Hmm.
Okay.
wow.
So we went there, we got the best of the best
Yeah.
to do this thing, and then still find ourselves as if we're in the poorhouse now with our situation. And that should never be the case.
Never.
Right,
That should
right.
have
So
never been the
so
case.
we've round robin back to a point where we already knew there were issues. And this is why I'm saying we have to now make it has to be the general us. It has
Yes.
to be now we, the people of these Virgin Islands, and
Hmm.
not the people we've hired, because a lot of
Mm.
people are waiting for
For
the
them.
people
The
that we've
people we
hired
hired.
to
Mm-hmm.
make the next move.
Yeah.
But it has to be we, the people of the
We,
Virgin
I agree.
Islands, will not accept X, Y, or Z.
Hmm.
We accept that our processes and our procedures have failed us. We accept that we have erred in not following X, Y, and Z. We accept our wrongdoing in lack of
Hmm.
transparency and accountability to the public. We endeavor to
Hmm.
this, this,
Do
this,
that.
this.
This. Yes.
Change the systems, modernize our computerized systems and our human resources. We endeavor to ensure that we are following our processes
Yeah.
according to what they've been written. We endeavor to be transparent in all aspects of governance. We endeavor to ensure that we are auditing and checking our processes
Hmm.
on a biannual or annual basis. I mean, these are simple,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
simple steps, but
Yeah.
this is where
Yeah.
we have to go in
Yeah.
order for us to now make the determination about what happens next. Because if not, like June alluded to earlier, if
Hmm.
we don't do this, we don't want to be at a point where now we're just being told. Because
Yeah.
Shana, it won't. This document won't say we encourage. It is going to say
This
because
is
you
what
have
we're gonna do.
failed,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
what will happen.
Gonna do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be it would and that's where it's as if the controls now again with the financial, just like how we had the financial management controls just come and basically put the ball and chain on you. It's
Yeah.
going to become they start to try to micromanage basically, and one of the
Mm,
commentators was like, yeah, we have to start looking at possible outcomes and the plans and start the lobbying. The shows like this is where we're want to make sure the public education and awareness is there, because we're not going to leave it for chance that some people understand or that they have the right information, but that they actually understand what it is that has to happen. Because and we're on a time, but I'm gonna drop this little tidbit and we're gonna pick this up definitely in January, that the last COI came because of public agitation.
Mm.
There was public agitation by Mr. Noel, the late Mr. Noel Lloyd, and the Positive Action Movement. Because when they became aware that this agreement was already signed with Bates Hill for three quarters of Anigada and to reclaim all of Wikomski and say, locals are not going to have access, it was like, no, no, we can't sit down on this. So I just happened to find something. I'm going to drop the link to an article that somebody wrote based on a conversation they actually had with Mr. Lloyd on, the experience that he had, that sometimes it was just him out there protesting this thing. But when other people joined him, a Royal Navy ship showed up because, they realized the last time we hit the streets, it was like, no, we're not going to sit down and just take it like that. And that's something that for us as Virgin Islanders that we have to start to remember, that when it comes to injustice, that we stand up for ourselves and stand up for ourselves as a people, right? So it's not an individual thing, and saying that we come together. So ladies, closing words, what's your thoughts, where we need to head into 2022 in terms of our mindset around the COI and what we do next?
I think for me,
Go ahead.
as it relates to where we go next, and right on the cusp of the final month in a year, and we're getting ready to start anew, I think we need to start to seriously think about what the BVI means and should look like in 5 years. I read an article today, I think it was called The Idea of Barbados. Um,
Mm,
Google it, search it. It was a piece that, if you are interested or even uninterested in us being able to determine our own self-sufficiency, is an article to think about. And when we look at the Barbadoses of the Caribbean, it is something that we have to ask ourselves: how do we get there? The only way to get there is to ensure that the system works for the people.
mhm. Well said. June?
From my perspective, as we head into 2022, for me, it's about being excited about the opportunity for us to further define ourselves as a people. We know what our heritage is. We know where we've come from as a people. But this is the time now for us to go to the next level as a people. We have to have a vision of where we want to be, as Angel says, where we want to be in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
We have to come to a place of understanding that the ability for us to get there is within us as a people, but only if we work together as a people. So we all need to be on the same page, working towards that vision, and understand that what we're trying to create here is a nation for all of us, not for one person, but for all of us, and for those of us coming behind of us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited about that growth that will happen.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. And I, like you, Angela, I'm inspired by what's happening in Barbados right now, because,
Absolutely.
the language and again, the culture and the mindset in terms of how they have gotten to this
Yes,
place, it's very significant in terms of an example
it is.
to those of us who say we want to strive to self-governance and how it comes about. So again, everybody isn't, I'm sure in Barbados is all, setting off firecrackers about this. But the whole idea is that we as a people, we're the baddest kids on the block. That's the sentiment I get from hearing these different speeches. We're the baddest kids on the block. We might be small, but as the Trini said, we talawa.
Yeah.
So we're
Mhm.
gonna take, we're gonna set our faces, as in what the Bible says, set your face like flint into the headwinds that will come,
I
because
keep
there's
going.
no denying that there's a lot from, especially from a global perspective and even locally, that they have their challenges also as we have. But you don't diminish yourself because of them and say that, we're not capable or we're not able or we can't become mature to that place. But it's about the mindset, eh? So,
Absolutely.
and that for me is where we're definitely after. So if you are listening to us by radio and you just tuned in, you're going to have to go to YouTube to the Vigilante Dialogues page and subscribe to our channel so that you can see this show in its entirety, or on Facebook. Be sure to like the page, subscribe to the channel so that whenever we post broadcasts that are upcoming, that you can always get reminders about it. And let's stay in tune. Let's stay engaged with this conversation. Again, our tagline is a change in conversation for a better Virgin Islands. I tell people all the time I don't like talk shop anymore. I shut those down. We're here to plan and then act, or we need to sit down. As it is.
Mhm.
So, we really have to make up our minds going into next year that our country is worth more to us than just what we see on the surface or what we feel about people and personalities, but that this is the next generation that we're defending for. So we're gonna definitely pick up again. This is a new series we're kicking off called VI Law and Order, and we started off with the Commission of Inquiry, but as you heard tonight, we touched everything as far as it concerns governance.
Mhm.
Hopefully we gave people a lot of takeaways in terms of how the public service works, how the governor's rule works, how the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office works, the House of Assembly, what their role is, and making sure that we know as an active citizenship that where we want to see that in terms of the goal for next year, that we become more conscious and aware and educate ourselves about what is happening in our country and how we can make that difference, because we have a role to play. In terms of, I think one of the key things that you guys talked about tonight is who sets the priorities. And if we set the priorities as the people, it's the People's House of Assembly and it's the public service. So that means the people need to start to activate and mobilize in terms of, again, having constructive conversations. It's not just about saying we're complaining about,
Mhm.
they ain't doing it. So
Mhm.
we gonna graduate from that, right, Angel? That's what
Yeah,
we're going
we
into next
definitely
year.
will. Hmm.
We're gonna graduate from complaining, and we're gonna start to take our responsibility, take our role in the governance of our country more seriously, and hopefully everybody else basically follow suit, because we start to change this conversation for the betterment of all of us. All right. So until next time, I am your host, Shaina Smith, saying yes, let's continue to change this conversation. Ladies, thank you for being here and for sharing
Thank
your
you.
thoughts. We got some
You're
good
welcome.
feedback in terms of person saying this was a good discussion. So I'm going to definitely be sharing it over the next week to make sure that if persons missed it, that they do, if they're able to catch up on it. So until then, have a good one. Bye.
Bye.